This is Season 4 of Southpaw Deep Space Nine. Season 5 will be released on the Southpaw Pod Patreon. This episode was recorded on May 20th, 2024. We are back with Southpaw Deep Space Nine Season 4. If you don't know what SDS9 is, it's Southpaw's completest DS9 watch-along show where we watch every episode, recap it, and analyze it. We are your hosts, Scott and Sam. Today, we are discussing our Man Bashir. Scott, can you recap this episode?
Someone is thrown through a glass. Bashir is dressed up in a mod style. There's all this intrigue. Bashir kisses a damsel and shoots a bad guy. It's a holosuite. Garak shows up and makes fun of him because he's just like, dude, since the new holosuite fantasy you've been kind of secretive and weird, and I've not been seeing you around, and you've just been doing this holosuite all the time. And Garak thinks is like deeper. It's like about Bashir's psyche and subconscious. And Bashir's like, no, it's not that deep. And he agrees to allow Garak to watch and interact. And Garak asks, what could possibly go wrong? So, and I think Garak is intrigued because he's like, he believes like, oh, you're a spy, and Garak might be a spy, right? So it's interesting. So back in the fantasy, they're in France. Bashir is playing basically a Bond analog, a rich dilettante, and going around saving the world in like a 60s, 70s England style. Garak is very curious. On the way back from a mission, our main team of Ben et al. Are in a runabout, but the warp core has been sabotaged, and there is an explosion as they are warping on the ship. So they don't quite warp. You see them like phase. And I was like, oh my God, it's going to be one of those kind of episodes. Eddington rushes to Ops to see what's going on. He's joined by Odo. They realize that the coils are overloaded and the patterns of the crew are trapped in the transporter buffer. So with the buffer basically about to go bye-bye, Eddington orders that the comms computers get rid of all non-essential memory and just sort of save the patterns, which causes like a station-wide power out. And Eddington and Odo are unsure where they are. So basically, this episode was really confusing for me. So I had to like think about it a lot. So basically, what makes the team the team? Also, we're not thinking about like all the other people on the runabout that might have died, but just like the main characters. Their psyches are somewhere and their bodies are somewhere inside the computer. Right? Does that sound about correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the simulation, Garak is very confused because he's like, why would spies live like this? This is not how spies live. Kira, out of nowhere, shows up in the holosuite as a Russian spy. Kira doesn't know that she's Kira. And we realize that the program is messed up. Eddington and Odo think that the warp data has possibly transported into this game because it's the holosuite, because it's one of the only things that hasn't been turned off to the power outage. And so Kira, Worf, Cisco, Miles, and Jadzia are in the program, but just like parts of them, because other parts of them are somewhere else. The science on this episode was a little confusing for me. And Kira is like, we need to get together to stop these artificial weather machines. So they go to find a piece of the puzzle, and it's a picture of Jadzia. And they realize that if any of these characters die, the data will disappear as well. So they can't. So normally he would maybe kill this character, or other characters would kill, but he can't do it. Miles shows up as an eye patch bad guy. They fight. Kira and Bashir kiss. Miles and his henchmen fight. The violence is real. It turns out, so there's no safeties. Something's going on. Garak says that Bashir needs to start thinking like a spy, that he's being reckless. And Odo goes to Quark's holosuite and sees that all 5 patterns of the team are in the sim, and their brains are all of the computers in the station. Again, I'm doing my best here, but basically, they need to connect their brains to their bodies, so they need to do some science. And Rom is very helpful because he's much smarter than he leads on, and they're redirecting all these cables. Back when we go to the holosuite in the Matrix, they're in France, and Bashir meets Worf, who's an associate of the bad guys. And back on Deep Space Nine, we realize that a Cardassian splinter group is claiming the attack, and this was their first violent attack. So again, they need to redirect the brain patterns and the physical patterns to the Defiant to make them people again.
A note to our listeners: if you love the Southpaw Project, please support us and help us get paid for our labor by financially supporting us on Patreon. This will give you access to exclusive bonus content, like early releases of Southpaw Deep Space Nine, our fictional narrative podcast, Fighters Brew, break-free versions of our shows without interruptions like you're hearing now, bonus articles, Fighters Brew transcripts with extra content, Liberation Martial Arts Online, as well as our private chat group on Discord. You can also make one-time donations at Ko-Fi or show your solidarity by wearing our swag. You can find all pertinent links at southpawpod.com.
Worf and Bashir, they play Baccarat, which is a very popular spy game, and Worf knocks the whole team out with blow dart or something. And they wake up and they meet Dr. Noah, who is Ben. And they're basically at the top of Mount Everest and talk about rocks. And Ben is basically going to do like an island. He has a master plan, and he's going to create an island. And it's interesting because his name is Noah, and it might involve a flood. And he kisses Jadzia. And so Ben is going the simulation Ben is going to activate these space lasers that will create earthquakes and will kill everybody and shrink the world and create a new world and take over the world with molten lava, and basically everything except for this island will sink, and then they'll recreate the world. And so basically everyone's going to die. Miles shows up ready to kill. Ben explains his plan like all bad guys do in these sort of movies. And Bashir and Garak are trapped, and they're going to be killed with molten lava. And they're not going to kill Kira because she's going to stay on the island to help repopulate. And Garak is like, you need to stop the program. We need to get out of here. But Bashir thinks that he can't do that he has to see it through. And right as like they're going to get lavinated, Bashir charms Jadzia and makes her take off her glasses, and they kiss, and then he escapes. They escape, and Garak believes that they need to accept there's going to be casualties, that in missions there are always casualties. And Bashir is no. They have a war of wits, and Bashir thinks Garak is jealous of him living this life, and Garak is going to stop the program, but Bashir shoots him, and Garak is impressed. The whole group meet. Ben is going to shoot Bashir. Bashir pretends that he's a bad guy to stop him from shooting. They have 2 minutes before they're safe. So Bashir, using all the tricks that Garak told him about, states why he wants to be a bad guy and presses go on the lasers. But Ben is like, I'm going to kill you. And he has the gun. And then as he's about to, as Ben's simulation character is about to kill Bashir, they beam back to Deep Space Nine, and Garak is very impressed, and they agree to have dinner. Bashir and Garak agree to have dinner next week. The end. I don't want to talk about this anymore.
All right, because for listeners and maybe Scott, prepare yourself for my analysis. It's going to be a rocky one, and it's probably going to be a lot of things people haven't thought about, or maybe they have thought about it, and then we're going to explore it more because there's a lot to explore here. There's a lot for me to unpack. So let me first start off by saying that this episode was hard for me to get through, probably like Scott, but maybe for different reasons and maybe for some of the same reasons. Bashir's fantasy world is like a 70s porn, which is also the same theme as Bond movies. Western male power fantasies of sexual conquest and world conquest. Take over non-Western countries and sexually conquer them, but portray it as if you're saving them, right? Intelligence agents, they save the world. They save these countries, right? By overthrowing and conquering non-white, non-Western countries. And also, you have to take the women, which is something that has been brought up in a previous episode. I believe it was Nog who brought that up about humans, that they kill the men and must sexually conquer the women. And on top of all that, the other element I don't like about Bond, which overtly flexes it in all of our non-Western faces, is the Western privilege to kill. They have the license to kill, which if you're the supreme authority of the world, I guess you could just give yourself carte blanche to do whatever. And so with the Western privilege to kill, we saw that play out before the era of DS9 and during DS9, and we see that now. But now, instead of the British, it's the US that can give carte blanche to kill. It does that for itself and its allies. For it to be able to do that means the US is the ultimate authority of the world, who even gets to decide who the authoritarians are, and it's never it or its allies. Western intelligence agents are imperial cops / fascists. They orchestrate overthrows and genocides. This is why I hate Bond and Bond parodies, because it romanticizes the imperial cop intelligence community. CIA is KKK to the rest of the world. Any Western intelligence agency is the KKK to the rest of the world. There are so many history books about what these agencies have done all over the world. The genocide they committed in Indonesia is one example. So this episode for me was very uncomfortable, and especially uncomfortable for my wife, who watches a lot of these episodes with me, as she's an Asian woman and she's watching this in 2024, which there's a lot of things about this just even on the surface level that doesn't play well in 2024. But she's also someone who understands how the West views her, but also understands the history of sexual conquest in Asia by the West and its allies. But continuing on discomfort, I know the teleporter problem gives lots of people discomfort. And in this episode, they reveal that yes, when you're teleported, you're just really data and your body is vaporized. What is data? A copy of original information. Teleporting is just making copies of people in a new place. This episode made that explicit. Now they're NPCs in holosuites, game data. In fact, just video game skins in this episode. Then they later get 3D printed into humans. Transport just means 3D printing, but transport sounds nicer, like it's a car ride. When a physical body disappears, it's not a transport. It's unaliving them, then 3D printing them. This episode told us how the human sausage is made. This also shows the power of language. By using words associated with travel, it shapes people's perceptions. By saying upload your consciousness onto the internet, people think travel rather than making a copy and unaliving the original. If you love the Southpaw Project, become one of our financial supporters. It'll help us supplement the cost of running this project, the incredible time and energy we put into it 7 days a week, and you'll be giving us some breathing room, not only to juggle Southpaw with our day jobs, but also to expand Southpaw into other areas. We can't exist without your contributions. Show your Southpaw solidarity by supporting us at southpawpod.com. But the copy can never replace the human because that's fascist reductionism, to reduce humans to just information and memories. It's highly, highly fascistic white supremacist thinking. If you fucked around with this thinking, let me break it down for you why this is white supremacist in its origins. The enlightened European slaveholder was the mind who used Black enslaved people as just bodies with no personhood. They reduced the enslaved to just bodies and themselves into minds. And since they're a mind that can control their own body, their own vessel, this vessel, why can't they mind control other bodies? This goes into their pedagogy as well. The oppressor viewed Black and brown learners as just depositories for their information, vessels. Reductionism is always bad and wrong. Don't reduce personhood to just a body or just information held in the mind, because they're both two halves of the same thing. You can't just have people as minds without people as just bodies and vice versa. It's all body fascism, which I study all day and have been studying for years, which culminated in liberation martial arts as a reaction against body fascism. And part of body fascism is the fetishizing of the mind, or the homunculus theory, which, whether people know it explicitly or not, this is the default framework people view personhood, that you're not the actual person, but what you're touching, this body, is just a body, a vessel, and there's a small version of you that pilots this body within the mind. This is often the allegory you see in media, or fuck it, even in Western philosophy or psychology or day-to-day conversations. People talk about it as if they're not the person you're seeing, but they're actually this small version of themselves that lives in an apartment in the mind. They're a CEO controlling this craft, and they live in the mind. This idea that the real you is not your body. And so what are people tacitly saying by that? The real you is some other thing that exists in the mind. That's the homunculus. But you're always the real you. It's just that you can be a better you, and you could also change your behavior. And also, you're not any one thing or a fixed point in time. And so you can change. So when people are like, oh, that wasn't me, it was you, but you're also fluid. An idea like uploading consciousness or teleporting doesn't just spring up from nowhere. These ideas are a colonial legacy of how to think about people. And it's very Western in their origins. A human is not a body or just information. A person is a phenomenon. A person is an experience. A person is non-categorical and non-reducible. This is a conversation that's a long time coming on the show, but now is the time to have it. And it really relates back to things I hate about Bond, where it reduces women and non-white characters to furniture. They're just there, but they're not actualized people. Their only purpose is to serve the character of Bond. Humans as objects. Orientalism, the Western gaze. Patriarchy, white supremacy. The other mindfuck about this episode, which reinforced shadow play from season 1, is that based on Star Trek world logic, holograms are also sentient beings, which goes back to what holograms do and how people treat holograms. Like when a holosuite person sexually assaulted Kira and Dax laughed it off. There's also the sexual bondage and murder of hologram people. Or there's the ability to just override their actions and control them rather than letting them just be autonomous. We could even relate this back to enslaved Afro-Haitians, which goes to the origins of zombie, which is that their bodies would just be controlled by these slaveholders, where they were just, like in this episode, video game skins, and is controlled by somebody else, this master, this slaveholder. The zombie idea was initially a fear that even after you're dead, they would keep doing this to you. So there's the personhood of holograms we have yet to reckon with, which we might explore in the future if this comes up again. What I did like about this episode is that they gave Eddington a bigger role.
Mm-hmm.
I like that minor characters get some shine in DS9. Scott, I know there was a lot that made you uncomfortable about this episode. Do you have anything you want to say about this episode? Any thoughts about this episode?
Not particularly. I give it a 3.
What's the main thing that made you take off some points?
It was really hard to follow.
Yes.
It was not. In fact, I give it a 2.5.
Very convoluted.
It was very convoluted. I don't like these concepts. They make me very upset. And I'm happy to talk about bodily autonomy another day, but not today. But yeah, I just thought it was fine. It didn't really push anything forward. It just didn't do it for me.
Is it a mythology episode? Like, does any of this matter later?
No.
I definitely felt like the writers thought they were being clever at the end, where like the agent is like, let the world blow up, blah, 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 blah. But I don't even know what that's supposed to mean.
Right.
Being clever means there's some kind of takeaway, some kind of meaning, some kind of like revelation, but I don't know. Yeah, it just added to how just convoluted the episode was.
Exactly.
I know you don't want to talk about this episode any longer. Can you tell us about the next episode then?
Ben goes to Earth.
Oh. Until then?
Ta-da-da!